Hello everyone and welcome to the first video on a multi-part series of creating custom models for Project DIVA. Um, this first video is intended to lay out how I personally do it, um, and especially using Autodesk 3ds Max. I generally do not use Blender for the workflow that I have for modding Project DIVA. It's usually always been either 3ds Max or Maya. Um, and before we get started, I do want to let y'all know that um, the latest Autodesk versions after 2020 are not amazing for modding this game. Um, they have switched over to a PBR workflow, and Project Diva does not use PBR. Um, and the only game that does use PBR is XHD, and almost no one is able to mod it. So, um, get started, you're gonna want to download an Autodesk 3ds Max version that is either 2020 or below. I recommend using anything 2016 through 2020 if you can get your hands on it, because they are they all look similar starting after like 2016, so you'll be able to follow this guide pretty easily. Um, but yeah, this first introduction video is just gonna be over skinning and weight basics, how to mix and match different module parts, and how to get a sense of how weighting really works, at least under 3ds Max. So the first thing we need to do, obviously, is to import a model. And how do we do that? So the program that we're going to need is called Miku Miku Model. It's created by my friend Skith. That's what he goes by. Um, Looks like this. Um, the important thing is that you do need to set up a configuration for the game. And in order to do that, you go into configurations. Um, I already have a few set up here, but basically what you're going to do is you're going to hit create, and you're going to specify where all these databases are for the game files. I have mine set up so that I just point directly to a file system I have set up that's read-only for the game, so I don't modify base data files. But um, generally, what you can do is just hit search, pick the ROM folder, and it'll find where everything is. That's good. Um, and then you need to figure out on your own uh, which which models it is that you want to rip. So in my case, to start, I'm just gonna pick the first item for Miku, which is just um, her standard outfit. It looks like this. Um, and generally, the file type we're gonna be working with is gonna be FBX. That's Autodesk's standard um, model file format. And to export files from Miku Miku model, we right click on the node, we hit export, and then we pick a place to put everything. So the way I have my folder structure set up is that I have uh, in my data drive, I have a 3ds Max projects folder, and I just have a bunch of random module parts that I've exported as time goes on. So if I were exporting this as new, I would just make a new, like, one, and then make sure you, under here, you select the, huh, oh, you select the, oh, sorry, I didn't click the right option. You hit export, and then you navigate to where you want to put it. and then you hit FBX export it. Just save. So when you first open 3ds Max, it's gonna look a little bit something like this. If you don't know what you're doing, it is a little confusing, but to make it easier, I will usually just switch to a single perspective view. And in order to do that, you just go over to this bottom right corner of the application where the walkthrough button is. Right click it, go to layout, click on this first one, and then click inside the viewport, and then hit perspective. There you go. And the controls are pretty basic. Um, you press Alt and the mouse wheel to move the camera around. Use them in and out by using the mouse wheel, all that sort of stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and import my item. In 3ds Max, you would go to File, Import, Import, and then you find where your item is. And you find where you exported your FBX. In the FBX import menu, you'll see that there are a few options for file content. When you're doing special things later, I'll show y'all. You will probably pick just update animation or add an update. But since you're importing a new model into the scene and you don't have anything else into the scene, you can go ahead and just pick add an update animation. And the rest of the settings are fine. The 3ds Max will figure it out. There we go. We have exactly what we were looking at in Miku Miku model. Now, there are some things that should be known before I continue when it comes with respect to materials. So for some reason, the um, 3ds Max will not read materials correctly. So you'll see that the the O1 little tattoo on Miku's skin is not right. It can be fixed in the material editor. I usually don't fix it. I'll fix it at the end when I'm nearing completion on my project, but um, materials don't display correctly. But for the most part, they're correct. Like the diffuse and the speculars are set correctly. Normal maps, the type of compression that Project DIVA uses in Future Tone is not compatible with 3ds Max. Um, I believe it still isn't as of this video. It's not compatible in 2021. So, do what you can. But I'll teach y'all later how to um, add normal maps in 3ds Max. So we have our model. Um, and wonderfully, the way MMM sets up export is that there's a container that's basically so it's this node, or it's this, and then you have your separate submeshes. So we have the different meshes here, we can cycle through them and all that sort of stuff. To get a basic idea of how the skinning works in 3ds Max, I'm going to show y'all like the skinning for, let's say, the sleeves. And say I want to put the sleeves on another model. So when you click on any object that has skin, you'll see that there are two modifiers. Skin is the actual weighting and the rigging of the item itself, and then you have editable mesh. Editable mesh is quite literally the mesh itself. Like you can make changes and modify the mesh, and you'll see that when you do this the first time, it'll say 3ds Max will complain and be like, "Oh, you have a modifier on top." Just go ahead and you can ignore it. You can select polygons. You can like do stuff to it. You can select by object. The only thing is like if you have a skin modifier on top of Editable Mesh, um, you won't be able to do too much. You can make like simple vertex edits and stuff like that, but if you go overboard, you're gonna break the skin that's on top. So be careful when you're messing around with Editable Mesh when there's a skin modifier on top, because there are some undesirable effects, but for the most part, it works out fine. So the skin modifier, like I mentioned before, it's just the weighting and the rigging of your object. 3ds Max has a pretty useful, for me at least, a useful way to view um, the weighting. So if you go over to edit envelopes, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of bones. So the sleeve is rigged to the upper arm, um, as it should be. Um, you'll see over here that you can see the weighting and the influence that the bone has on the object itself. So the sleeve on the left side is weighted to J kata L WJCU. Um, it's weighted over here for the sleeve correction bone under J sleeve L000 WJ. And then the forearm over here is weighted to J UDA L. And then towards the top, it's weighted to KL Waki L, and so on and so forth. The useful thing about this is that it basically lets you see what your object is dependent on for the rig. So say I want to import these sleeves onto another model that doesn't have sleeves. In this example, I'll go ahead and load up um, Dancer Miku. Um, she doesn't have sleeves. So for now in the scene, I don't care about anything else. I just want the sleeves. So I'll go ahead and just delete everything else because I don't need it. So now when you're deleting stuff, don't delete the bones, obviously, because without the bones, your object's not going to have any weighting to it. So a useful thing if you want to grab different meshes and keep their skinning, just look here in this panel and you'll be able to see what bones are necessary. So I already know that I'm gonna need basically the arm bones. So I'll just go over here to the skeleton, and the skeleton is pretty standard. Um, it's the same across all Project Diva games, more or less, and it's even the same going all the way back to Virtua Fighter 5. You can see that, there's a whole bunch of other extra bones that we're not going to need. Um, Usually the easiest way to do this, like if you're working on separate parts of the body, like I already know and remember that anything that's starting with KL, Kosi, etc., WJ, that's all related for the bottom part of the body, like legs and some part of the torso. And KL Mune BWJ is for the upper parts of the torso. The same goes for Nhara B and Nhara C. JCal WJ is for the head. Nkubi WJ EX is the expression for the neck. And KL Waki are like sort of the shoulders. So once you start working with the files a bit more, you know what stuff is. So for this, at the very least, I'm gonna need KL Waki. So I'll just get rid of KL Kosi, Hara, keep KL Mune. I don't need the necktie bones. I don't need the breast bones. I don't need the head bone or the neck. And Future Tone does use some extra correction bones. So for the armpit, there's a correction bone that's called Nwaki X. You'll just have to be careful and look out for those, but not necessary for this. So here I have the object that I want to use. What I do is I'll just file, export, export, and then I'm gonna make a new folder. Um, Usually I just stick parts in a random out folder. What do I want to call this? And when you're exporting for Project Diva, um, usually most people say not to change it, but I think you're supposed to change it to meters. Change the scene conversion units to meters because otherwise, like, it'll be too huge or too small. You just hit OK. So I'm gonna save the scene first, um, just in case. New all. I'm gonna import a new model that I want to import sleeves on. So I'm gonna find out which model Dancer Miku is, and I will be right back. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I figured out which item it is. In this case, it's the 17th body part for Miku. I'm gonna go ahead and import it. Add an update since I don't have anything else in the scene. Takes a bit sometimes. Okay, so here we go. I have the body loaded. So I don't want these. The what are they called? Her little armband thingies that are around her hands. So it's gonna be a problem if I want to use the sleeve mesh. So what I'm gonna do is I'm quickly going to go ahead and go into the editable mesh modifier, hit yes, and I'm gonna select by element. So element selection is a really useful tool. It allows you to select stuff sort of by whatever algorithm 3ds figures it out. I think usually it'll use like the mesh topology to figure out what's separate and what's not. But I use it all the time. I find it really useful. It lets me delete stuff pretty quickly. Like I don't have to go through the process of vertex editing. Um, I prefer it a lot. But yeah, it let me get rid of this pretty quickly and easily. And now I just need to figure out what these are. So since these are just links to the hands, oh, they're linked to this too. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna edit it and delete these separately. So now she just has, now it's just her arms. So I'm gonna go ahead and file, import, import, and I'm gonna go find where I stuck that, those sleeves. So I named it, sleeves only. So when you're importing something else into a scene, um, add and update animation is generally going to be the way you're gonna do it. If there's something that you need to correct when it comes to the rig, and I'll discuss this later, you'll just use update animation, but for now, just use add and update animation. And there we go. She has her little sleeves. Now, you'll notice that since um this isn't the 001 mesh, her arms are sticking out because she has more geometry um than she usually does when she has the sleeves. So to combat that, you're gonna have to edit the body mesh. So I'm gonna use Editable Mesh, And for this part, I'm going to have to use vertex editing. The wonderful thing about 3ds is that it has different selection modes. So by pressing Q, you can cycle through the different selection modes. For stuff like this, I'll usually use the freeform selection tool and then just draw out where I need to get rid of vertices. You have to be careful when it comes to editing meshes like this. Not because you can uh, mess the skin up real easily, but because um, you can delete some parts that you actually need. So I'm trying to be careful and not delete anything like that's gonna show. That way it looks good. Yeah, there we go. I got it for this arm. So you just have to be careful and make sure that you don't like go overboard when it comes with editing certain parts of the meshes. And since this is just a tutorial, I won't be too concerned about making it look good, but yeah. And there we go. I did screw it up a bit over here, but it's fine. The game, the game won't care, and no one will notice probably. Um, but yeah, that's basically how you import, how you mix meshes, and keep their skinning. So if I was to import this into the game right now and not change, like not fix up the materials, it would work. Obviously, I would want to fix up the materials, but um, like the sleeves will animate just like normal. You will have to add obviously like any expression blocks that were for the original mesh, but for the most part, uh, this is just how I do like skinning and stuff for mixing module parts. Like it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. The more that you use 3ds Max, the more things you'll find out. But this skinning panel is quite honestly a very useful. I find it more useful than Blender, how you do it in Blender, to mix module parts like this, because I can figure out what skin it is that I need for certain parts of the meshes. And yeah, I mean, that's all I have for this first video. Um, in more videos, I'll cover stuff like skin wrapping, material editing, maybe some advanced skin wrapping techniques, but this is just a starter for the first video. And yeah, that's all I have.